For our next session, we'll be zeroing in on what is literally the core question of the 21st century media, connectivity and bandwidth, especially with the mobile variety, which, especially in emerging markets, is transforming everything from commerce to entertainment. And to lead that discussion, I'd like to welcome to the stage Dr. Jeffrey Cole, who runs the USC Annenberg School Center for the Digital Future. He'll be talking with Comscore CEO Magid and Osman Sultan, CEO of Do here in the UAE. So welcome all.
I'm going to start here, and I'll move over there. I'm going to ask the panel to come up. For many years, I have either followed Geoff Ramsey or Geoff Ramsey has followed me, and there's nobody who packs it in or really gives an overview the way he does. I'm delighted to be here. Let's get started. We have a great panel. I'm going to make a few comments, and then I will join my panelists. But let's get started. One of the questions I'm going to ask both of the gentlemen on my panel is, when did you realize the internet was going to change the world? My answer came in 1998, working with the American broadcast networks, when I discovered that for the first time in the history of at least American television, kids under the age of 14 were starting to watch less television. First time they had ever been drawn away from television, the most powerful medium ever invented. And the reason or the explanation was singularly computers and the web. And that spoke to me in hugely powerful terms. If this technology could draw kids away from television, then something hugely important was going on. So because of that, 12 years ago, we started tracking people, watching as they went from non-user to dial-up to broadband, continued tracking the never users, and it was clear that the internet was going to change the world. When we started doing our work, it was obvious that how we communicate was going to change, how we work was changing, how we were buying was changing. All of that was obvious, but we never could have anticipated 12 years ago that user-generated content was going to give almost everybody a voice, that social networks would reach over 1 billion people, that in 2000 everybody connected to this internet using the statistics Geoff used with a PC on the desk and a hard wire to the wall. And today we think the PC is going away. We think the PC is only going to survive for about 4 to 6% of the population. Computer-assisted designers, heavy-duty number crunchers, big writers, maybe college students while they're in college. The rest of us are going to be accessing the internet with this thing in our pocket or purse. We also have seen tremendous changes in screen time. In 1975, in the developed world, we spent 16 hours a week in front of the screen. Now, last year, that number was 41 hours. We think in the next 3 to 5 years, that's going to go to 55 hours, and we don't think it's going to stop there. If you talk to a teenager, there's practically not a moment of his or her life that they're not in front of a screen, except when they're in school and asleep. And I'm not so sure they're not in front of a screen when they're in school. They certainly are during lunch and recess, and I think more than we'd like to admit are during class. And we know that 80% of teenagers sleep next to their mobile phones. When we started our work, one of the questions the press wanted an answer to every year was, how much time are people spending online? How many hours? Was it more than television? Was it more than we did this or that? And now we found that the amount of time people spend on the internet is becoming irrelevant, because we're not online in blocks of time anymore. Now we're online between the time the airplane lands and when it gets to the gate, late. We're online that if we're having lunch and you're 5 minutes late to lunch, I'm answering my email, hoping you're 10 minutes late to lunch. All of a sudden, the amount of time is just filling little spaces in our lives. And the other question the press were really interested in 12 years ago was, where do you connect from the internet? How much of it's from home? How much is from the office, work, computer cafes? Now that's become irrelevant as well, because even with the home, we're no longer, as I said, with the PC on the desk. Now we're connecting from the bedroom, the attic, the basement, the backyard. We find 50% of people who have Wi-Fi connect from the bathroom. We're connecting from everywhere. We're moving to an internet where we're always on, and we're connecting from everywhere we are, especially our cars. So with that and internet everywhere, let's start with our session. And I'm going to move over, and I am absolutely delighted to have, first we'll talk to Osman Sultan, who is the CEO of DO. DO, as I think most of you know, has had spectacular success transforming this region, which was a monopoly in mobile communication, into two major competitors, 5 million customers for DO. And Mr. Sultan is recognized as one of the 30 most influential executives in the Gulf Coast. So welcome, thank you for joining us. And first question to you, I'm going to try to spend a couple of minutes with Mr. Sultan, then I will spend a couple of minutes with Mr. Abraham, and then we will ask some questions for all of us, and then leave some time for you to ask questions as well. But let me start. I'm from Southern California, which, like this region, is a desert. Now, we only survive in Southern California because we stole water from the Colorado River, but water is what's transformed this region as well. But I suspect you think that telecommunications and digital communications is right up there with water in its importance to what's happening in the world and in this region.
Well, actually, Jeffrey, it's very interesting that you're drawing this analogy, because this was exactly the theme of the corporate campaign that we did when we launched DO. Even prior to offering services, we just said and made this analogy between communication and water, and the way it's flowing, and actually in the way it just support life. And to just continue on this quote-unquote philosophical view of things, it's not a coincidence, I believe, that we see civilization, being born and developing around ways of communication that mankind could find. I mean, why do you speak about a civilization along the shore of rivers, or along rivers, or along the shores of ocean, or in the roads and valleys between mountains? Because there is a way to communicate. Now there are new ways of communication, this connectivity that you've been talking about. So I believe that we will see new formats of civilization, and this is what we are witnessing today.
And what are the rights of citizens in these formats? What can people expect? What are they entitled to? We know as citizens of the world, we're entitled to freedom of speech and freedom of press. What are we entitled to? What are our rights in the digital world?
I think it's very difficult to have a precise answer. What I would say is that we have new capabilities. We have new enablers. Technology is creating new enablers. We are doing things differently. We have new behaviors. So I think that we need now to start looking at the different aspects, whether we're talking on regulation, whether we're talking on aspects related to privacy, whether we're talking on aspects related to security, new enablers, new technology, probably practices that will divert or misuse that, and then probably the antidotes of the things that we create. But we have to look at it in a very positive way. We have to embrace it. This is now a wonderful power, and this is not only changing the ways individuals, communities, corporations, governments But if we look at countries that are not so far from here and what happened in the past year, this is changing history of nations, this connectivity and this ability of being able to express. So I think we need to take it very seriously, and we are. I think we need to embrace it, open our eyes, minds, hearts, but as well think a lot of the question that you are, what are the rights of individuals, what are the rights, where the societies need to protect themselves, etc.
Well, the president of Finland has declared broadband to be a basic human right of being a Finnish citizen. Are there some basic things people are entitled to in the telecommunications world here?
Yeah, of course. Of course, the right of being connected. Everyone can become a publisher. Everyone has a window to the world. I mean, if we see the world of internet, and you asked a question that I was hoping you will not ask, because that will make us really look very old. When did we realize that this is really going to change the world? Let me just start with that. It just happened that I started my career within a telecom group and something that is considered to be the ancestor of internet. So regardless of the word internet, I realized at some point that this ability of being connected, this ability that just with a keyboard and a screen, being able to reach so much, I realized this in the late 80s. The internet was not yet there. There was this system in France, and I was in a company that was really working in that. This system, for some of you heard about it, was called the Minitel. And when I saw my 10-year-old sister, she was 10 or 11, she would hate if I say that she was 10 or 11 in late 80s, but she's not here. And she was visiting me in France. I was starting to work. And she was on a screen playing chess with a person that was completely in another way, and she didn't know where it was, and playing chess. So it struck me, this is going to change completely a lot of things.
So your sister was one of the first massive multiplayer gamers.
Obviously, late 80s. So if we look at the history of this thing that we call the internet, we started by what I like to call the abundance model. If you look at the companies who were on the internet space from the 94, 95, the information highway concept of Mr. Gore, and then to the mid 2000, this is just, putting content and finding instruments and tools to search efficiently in these contents. The Google, etc., the Amazon. Then, when this marketplace was created, a lot of things were happening. Footfall was there. Merchants came into this space. And beginning of the 2000, we started to live this era that I call the transactional part. We started going to the internet like we were going to a library, picking something on the shelf, getting an article, getting something. Then we started to go to the internet like we go to a shop, buying something. We were buying tickets, we were, just making bookings. Today we go to the internet, the third era, like we go to a cafe. Because we're just going there, we're meeting people, we're seeing people, we're looking at what's going and what's happening. And that is the networking part that gave this multiplication power to the internet story.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it. Let's bring Magid into the conversation. Magid Abraham is the president, CEO, and co-founder of Comscore, one of the leading market research companies in the world. He himself is considered legendary. He has been inducted into the Entrepreneurship Hall of Fame and is a tech pioneer, as named by the World Economic Forum, and many other honors as well. Somewhere in these questions, if you want to also address, you can do it at first or work into it, when you realized the internet was going to change the world. But first, since we have Comscore here and you do work all over the world, I thought you might want to give us a little bit of a sense of this region and some of the trends and issues you're finding in the Middle East.
Well, sure. I think Geoff alluded to a lot of the data on the Middle East, but generally speaking, the internet penetration in the Middle East is slightly higher than the world average. In this region in particular, the most of the countries have 50% or more penetration. The UAE is having the maximum level of penetration, meaning percent of the population that have an internet connection. In terms of when we look at number of hours spent on the internet, it approaches anywhere from 60 to 80% the birthplace of the internet, which is the US. So there is clearly a lot of progress that has been made, and obviously we all know that the internet has empowered this region by breaking the control of the states and the political power to enable individuals and citizens to be able to express themselves and to be able to foil any attempt at restricting information. As far as when I realized the importance of the internet, there are kind of two moments. The first moment is in 1999 when we started Comscore. I went to Silicon Valley, and at the time I had the idea that the internet was going to be big. It needs to be measured, not only in terms of people using the internet, but also what people are buying, what kind of transactions they're conducting on the internet. And when I met with a venture capitalist, it was very clear that those people were very interested in any business model that is going to disrupt a traditional offline business model. I had 26 PowerPoint slides. I got $26 million in valuation for the company, so it turned out to be $1 million per slide, which
bigger pack.
exactly. I was regretting not having more.
You should have had a Geoff Ramsey deck.
Exactly. So 3 or 4 years later, as we got established, I made, we had a company meeting, and I made a speech that said that, in my mind, there are 6 turning points in the history of humanity and civilization. So that would be the agriculture, the invention of the alphabet, etc., the availability of the printing press, industrial revolution, the invention of the transistor, and then the internet. And I think that the internet is just, no question, the biggest event that ever happened in history, and it provides your average citizen with the best deal that was ever created. I mean, if you think about it, you want to see newspapers for free, you can do that. You want to see magazines, you can do that. You want to go to MIT, you can go and watch entire courses at MIT. You want an encyclopedia, you used to pay thousands of dollars to get it. Now you get it for free. You want to go and buy a product. Now the power is in the hands of the consumer. You can basically get product reviews. You can get prices. You make sure that you are getting competitive bids for your business. So any way you look at it, the internet has empowered users and has really democratized the world. It's only going to be a matter of time before the developed world and the developing world have very little difference in terms of their access to information and knowledge that for the last 200 years have given the advantage to Europe and the Western Hemisphere.
That sounds like some hype, but I couldn't agree with you more. Incidentally, I'm doing the keynote next Tuesday at the American Magazine Conference in San Francisco. They're not so happy about all this reading of magazines for free. So at Comscore, some of your biggest customers are advertisers, marketers, trying to figure out how to spend their money. I'm not a shill for the advertising business. I've come to the conclusion that if digital content is going to survive, it's going to be largely through digital advertising. So I want to see digital advertising survive, so content survives. What are you finding in the digital advertising space as far as effectiveness? We saw from Geoff how the spend is changing, but what are you finding?
Well, a couple of things. Number one is that search has been the runaway success of digital advertising. Then you have display and video. And the dirty secret of display and video on the internet is that about half the advertising that is served to the end user is actually not seen by an end user. And so as a result, when an advertiser is buying, let's say, 10 billion impressions, on average, 5 billion of them are just not seen. They're below the fold, users don't scroll down to see them, there is fraud, there is all kinds of stuff that basically affects that. And in fact, the industry is moving to a currency where it says we're no longer going to pay on the basis of how many ads were served, we are going to pay on how many ads are seen. And I think that this will actually create a lot more certainty about the value of advertising and will eventually help the industry really succeed. Right now, there is unlimited supply in the industry. This will cut about 50% of the advertising inventory and will create some upward pricing pressure that content providers are obviously very hungry to have.
A pretty hopeful picture. I think I only have time to ask one question of the two of you, and then we'll ask some questions of the audience. So let me ask, and let each of you answer from different perspectives. Let me ask about Facebook, which despite its extraordinarily unimpressive IPO, has crossed last week 1 billion users and is changing the world. When you consider that there are about 6 billion people on the planet and 1.3 billion Chinese are precluded or not eligible or able to have Facebook, we have 1 billion users out of about 4.7, or more than 1 out of 5 people on the face of the earth are members of Facebook. Let me start with Mr. Sultan. What does that mean to you as a telco, this over-the-top service that you're drawing so much time? What does that mean to your business models and your future, the fact that this is such a heavy activity?
Well, it's a big debate. It's currently a big debate. And for people who go to telco conferences, this is always, you know, this story. Love and hate. First of all, I don't see us in competition. It's very important that we highlight this. And here again,
you are quoted in the newspaper today.
Let me use a metaphor. Telcos have been for decades building roads and transporting things on road and charging for using of these roads. Now, since the internet, what we do is we just drop the customer at the entrance of a big shopping mall, and the thing is customers are buying more and more things. We don't get any penny, any cent from what they do in this mall, whether the mall owner, and that's legitimate, whether the mall owner is monetizing this through advertising, whether they are buying, whether... The story is they are getting out of these shopping malls with bigger and bigger bags, video, larger and larger videos, and they want us to transport them. So we need to have bigger and bigger cars, and we need to maintain larger and larger roads and build larger and larger roads. Our revenues are under pressure, but our investments have to really be multiplied because of this. Think of the number that in 2015, it will take you 5 years to watch all the video that will be transiting on IP networks in 1 second. Imagine the type of infrastructure that is needed. I think this is a story where states, regulators, policymakers, industrial operators need to think about this and need to figure out who is going to pay for that. We can't charge customers. Customers, very rightly so, are saying, listen, you used to charge me by the time I spend, you used to charge me by the distance. Now it's simple. I would like a flat fee, and I want this flat fee being connected as a basic human right. So you expect this basic human right to be less and less expensive for an individual. But nevertheless, there are heavy investments to be made on infrastructure, and customers are uploading and downloading much more heavier things requiring larger infrastructure. That's the paradox. I believe we need to think about this. I believe we need to change our business models as well. I believe we need to be creative, but not to resist to that. And again, we are not in a competition mode with the like of Facebook, the YouTube, the Google of this world. We should find a way of existing there, developing the internet universe, because the internet pie, as has been presented by the previous speaker, is going to be larger and larger. And I'm sure that there are clever ways of doing so.
It's one of the best counters to the net neutrality argument I've heard. And Magid, what do you see as the future of Facebook from a consumer and a business? Do you think it's going to go the way of MySpace? Or do you think it's going to survive forever?
I think Facebook is an amazing company, given how fast they have grown and what they have become. They have a network effect. If you have 200, 500 friends on Facebook, it's very, very difficult to change that to some other service. And Facebook has been pretty innovative in terms of making sure that there is no feature that somebody comes up with that they don't really match. So the issue for Facebook is how do they monetize? And they have done a pretty good job in terms of monetizing the PC, except now a lot of their traffic is coming on mobile devices. For example,
which they've seemed unprepared for till now.
They seemed unprepared for, and it's more challenging. It's more challenging because the real estate on the screen is not nearly as much. But if you look at the frequency with which a mobile user uses Facebook, the time they spend on Facebook, it is actually higher than it is on the PC. So that's one of their challenges is figuring out how to monetize mobile. There is also, I think that they still have a lot of room to go in terms of monetizing PCs. They account for about 25 to 30% of all display advertising impressions. And and then the experiment last week in terms of starting to charge consumers for doing something. They're charging them $7 to be able to promote a posting, which is a first. Usually the internet is a free thing, so we don't know whether it will work or not. But I will point out that it is just about the cost of a frappuccino to be able to do that.
Although generally we find users want the internet to be free the way the good Lord intended it to be. But you're painting a pretty rosy picture despite the IPO. And Osman, did you want to make one final comment?
Yes, on generally speaking, on the way and this difference between the networking side and the search engine that we saw in the beginning of the internet. I think from an individual point of view, we are witnessing more. The access to knowledge used to be much more vertical. If you go, when we used to do searches on Google, we're going to an expert. Now more and more people are taking, specifically when it comes to media, are taking their source of media from the friends that they have. So we are witnessing a less deep type of quest for knowledge, but much broader, as opposed to this approach. And I think this is going to determine the structuring of marketplaces that we are seeing more and more.
And we and Comscore and the other people who track track these things year after year, we'll see.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, if that's a good thing and makes us smarter and more enlightened, or moves in the other
But that's a
direction.
shift in the access to knowledge, access to media, access to information that is more and more happening, and I thought it was interesting to point it.
Let's make sure we get at least one or two questions in. We'll continue this. I think they want to bring a microphone to you, but let's, oh, okay. Ladies first, and then we'll do two questions. Okay, if you can, the lady in green, and then the gentleman in the front row.
Stéphanie Hospital, Orange. The two of you are very successful entrepreneurs. So if you were to start a company now, what would you do to be as successful as you've been, the two of you, over the last 10 years?
Well, let me start.
They started the company already.
Put a big PowerPoint together.
You know, I think that still what you see on the internet is disrupting classic offline business models. So if you can find something that is still like that, that's clearly an area of opportunity. I think communications is a big area of opportunity, even though I think the exit for those types of companies will end up being bought by Google or Facebook. And then anything that has to do with social networking is very hot, although I am not of the generation that really understands social networking anywhere near the people who are in their 20s, so probably is not something that I would be involved in.
We're running out of time.
I don't know exactly. I know two things. I know one, that it will be related to the Arab world because I have a passion for this region, this culture, and I think it's underserved and we need to do something. The second thing, it will be related to infotainment because there is a big appetite, and I think there is a lot of creativity bubbling there, and how you link this to the right channels and the right format, there is something in the middle maybe that is missing, so it's probably in that sphere.
And since the second question came from somebody sitting next to the big boss, John Mercant, I assume you'll give us a waiver to go a minute over time. And you had a question. Can we get just
the mic?
And unfortunately, this will have to be our last.
My question is to you, Professor Cole, has to do with the issue of property rights. Who owns the contents, the rights of the contents that the users of the media is putting there, of the social media? For example, I'm as a user, what are my rights? And also this has to do with the people in telcos, where they collect a lot of information about us. What are our rights? You know, this is a very important issue. And the other thing is, the other question, which has to do with the telcos, do you think telcos will move from service providers in terms of communication, talks, etc., to advertisement companies, like, for example, like Google. Google builds a big, huge infrastructure to help in the search engine, but most of the revenues are monetized through advertisement. Do you think we will see one day that you, as Hindu or others, will give phones for free, which you are doing in some segments of the market? But would you get to a point where, come, I'll give you a phone, just use it, and change your business model?
The first question, although very complex and important, I'll try to answer quickly. Who owns the content in social media really is evolving. The position of Facebook, the position of Pinterest has been anything you post, they own. Even if you close the account, they can do anything they want, sell, commercialize, put somewhere else. They've gotten a lot of pushback on that. They've had to amend those policies. Pinterest has done a complete 180 on that. Facebook has done somewhat of that. I think we're moving, not slowly anymore, but I think we're moving to the person who posts owns the content. And if they decide to end that connection, that the social media network has no control, that we're not there yet. And Osman, if you wanted to take the
Yes,
other.
on the telco, that's a very valid question. I personally believe that any telco need to go in this change in business model. You're absolutely right. We need to move progressively from being able to charge access, because that's the bread and butter of our revenue, to being able to monetize audience. Today we charge access per customer, per user. We will be able to charge audience, which means monetizing on the advertising, etc. So we need to shift and create these digital spaces. I strongly believe all telcos need to move down that path. And yes, giving points. I don't like too much the word for free. This free thing makes me a little bit itchy. So, I mean, but let's say giving to customers more things, more goodies, and, you know, and that linked to your rights. We will not have the right to bombard you with advertising unless you tell us, yes, I accept. And probably at some point you will say, I accept, but give me something in exchange. And we will be certainly ready for that negotiation and conversation with our users, absolutely. Yes. So that's your right. But to come to the right point, you should certainly, as a consumer and as a customer, we should define the chart of rights, and that is an international debate that we are absolutely as well involved in. Absolutely right.
A CEO of a major company doesn't like free things.
No.
I'm teasing you. Of course, you've got
Yes,
stockholders.
and I'm honest. So
You would actually be surprised at what people give away to get something free.
No, we've
Yes.
seen that.
Absolutely.
We've seen that not work for many years. And anyway. I have never seen 30-some minutes go by so quickly. We really could have used another hour. And I warned you we were all going to get frustrated that we're only going to. But what a great surface we got to scratch. I am enormously appreciative of Osman Sultan and Magid Abraham for participating, and I think we'll all be available later in one-on-one for some questions. Thank you very, very much.